Good morning out there. Wanting to come on and talk to you about some of what I'm learning about this thing we call trauma. Some of it in my conversation series on the magic of conscious relationships, or conscious relationship, as my friend Jackie helped me realize that really we could be talking about our relationship with everything and anything, including ourselves, right? And how important it seems to be to acknowledge our trauma and do things to understand more what we've been through, to acknowledge what's happened to us, right? And to take care of ourselves, to find ways to move through what we go through, right? And not have it shut us down or break us down or create issues for us, right? And I just had a powerful conversation with my friend Barbie Jolliffe, who's a trauma coach, after having resolved and healed some devastating trauma in her family, and then going through training and study over the years and helping us understand how to handle this very real thing called trauma that many of us are carrying, in a sense, in our bodies as energy that is very likely the reason for a lot of our complaints and our conditions, whether it's physical manifestations, hi Stacy, or emotional challenges, right? Mental health challenges. How much of our depression, anxiety, suicidal rates, domestic violence, right? All of those related to our trauma. And so, but I feel like, part of why I'm willing to talk about this difficult topic is not only because it seems important to acknowledge the truth that a lot of us have trauma, and even that, as my friend Barbie was just indicating, that going through this pandemic and even after there's this pandemic, there's going to be a lot of trauma to be dealt with all of us, right? With our kids, with the adults, right? And as Stacy reminds, it's all energy and it all matters and affects our body. So that's really where we often feel our trauma, right? Whether it's in physical complaints, even chronic pain issues, issues going on with our organs, lowered immunity, or other ways that the body can start to shut down and have different forms of dysfunction even, right? Because of that stored trauma that is very real and is energy that we're holding in our bodies. So I feel like the first part of resolving and healing the trauma is just acknowledging that truth and bringing in that kindness and compassion with ourselves and others, right? Understanding that we're dealing with this. And although I feel like we're also at an exciting time where we're understanding more about how to not only understand and look at in therapeutic ways our trauma, right? And how support can really help with that, whether it's a professional or someone just in our life that is a safe space for us to reflect and start to even try new ways with ourselves and with others. But as we start to look at how we can take care of ourselves and how much things like our self-care and our spirituality can play such a role in our healing our trauma, and that often that's, and I know Stacy would vote yes on this, being such a spiritual teacher herself, that, and even my friend Barbie, who has gone through such devastating trauma and now is teaching and helping people with their trauma, teaching about that, she so clearly could see in a spiritual sense that that's part of why she went through the trauma she went through, is because it's part of her tapping into her passion and purpose is to help other people with their trauma, right? So the ways that our spiritual practices and perspectives, and even how that's going to weave into our psychology, it's going to help so much if we can make sense of what we've gone through, right? And even, again, just the kindness and compassion that we can bring in, that attitude with ourselves and then how bringing in the right self-care and support can really help us shift things. That's what I also want to talk about, because I've been loving in some of my one-on-one yoga therapy sessions with my clients, who I'm so honored to be in on their stories and transformation, and witnessing how adding things like energetic practices, right? And Stacy says we're powerful beings and we can alchemize the energy even when it's trapped in our body. And it's so important that we do, right? Because it's like, if we don't alchemize it, it's there and it's creating problems. But then it's exciting to realize how much we can alchemize it, right? With the right self-care, with the integrating of our spirituality, really looking into that more and more spiritual practices, right? And then addressing it all as energy is where it gets really exciting, though. And that's where I'm seeing in some of my work with my clients the changes. And what's really fun and exciting to think is what's on the other side of that trauma. And that's what I'm seeing with my clients that I love, that is they're now bringing in more practices, which, yes, interestingly includes things like movement and the right use of exercises and breath to attend to it as energy, and to free up that stuck energy, to get energy moving, to bring in fresh energy to help us let stuff go. So I see my clients who are getting the most powerful changes are people who are attending to it physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, right, with themselves. And even in our conversations and in their practices, often they're realizing more about why they've been feeling the way they've been feeling, how they did go through trauma that they hadn't even acknowledged for themselves, right? Whether it's an injury that might have really redirected your life, or some things, otherwise, so many things can happen in life, right, that redirect us, and that sometimes we just roll with. We don't even realize we've been traumatized, right? We're just doing what we can to move forward from those traumatic experiences, right? But often we don't know how it's impacted us, and then especially how it's energy, and we're holding on to that energy in the body. So yeah, but amazingly exciting how when we're attending to it, not only physically, absolutely getting really consistent with some specific ways to free up that stuck energy, to gently, lovingly bring in ways to address it as energy, right? But also things like journaling as a practice, or any form of meditation, which journaling is just a really great form of meditation, in my opinion, for a lot of us, because it's just even more easy to engage with, right? Because of so many of us feeling challenged to just do the traditional styles of meditation where it's about just sitting and listening to ourselves, right? Something like journaling can give us a chance to do that. And then also such a spiritually connecting practice, because you're talking to someone when you're journaling. But also what's cool about something like journaling is it's also energy work. So when you're starting to write about these things, when you're starting to realize these things, you're letting this stuff out. So it's some more of that shifting and lifting and resolving of the trauma when you're doing something like journaling. How great is that? And likely that would be true also when we're having supportive conversations, right? That through conversation, that's a form of energy work, right, too. And so when we're getting a chance to realize and express and share, so just the various ways that, again, we can address it as it's this energy that's in our bodies, and how can we help ourselves very gently and lovingly. But that's really the awareness too, though. And there's a lot of specialized trainings in the yoga world right now too about being aware, basically, that when you're doing things like yoga with people, when you're getting them on the mat and you're taking them through these exercises and you're engaging their breath, that you're going to help them start to tap into and free up their trauma. And that's why it really is about being so gentle, being so careful, and really encouraging people to not push through pain, not make it about more of a battle with ourselves, right? Or overriding that guidance from the body, and just acknowledging that we're dealing with trauma when we're doing something like even a yoga mat practice. And that's where, for a lot of us, I would vote that a lot more gentle practice is probably more appropriate, and what's going to actually help you create more changes. But that's just in my experience, and just probably because that's my style. But if for you, going at it hard with an hour of hardcore power yoga does that for you, then awesome, right? But to acknowledge that you're dealing with that trauma, you're healing that trauma with these practices, right? Attending to it as energy. And then here's what I wanted to say is the exciting part I'm seeing is as we resolve that trauma, start to free some of that up, reconnect with ourselves in various ways, reconnect with our body, right? Reconnect spiritually more. We now start to see, wow, what's on the other side of that trauma is often the energy of those next great ideas, right? The solutions, the resolutions, the inspiration, the guidance about, yeah, even what we are passionate about, what is part of our purpose, and what we do really want in life, and really helping us move into that, right? So there's like an exciting momentum to, I feel like it's like, it reminds me of I think Bashar has the analogy of the rubber band effect, that if we can think of like human change as something that, so maybe when we feel like we're doing something like really attending to or resolving our trauma, which might involve looking back at the past, right, in some conscious ways, not dwelling, right, and not getting bogged down in the judgment of ourselves or even of if certain things should have happened, right? But in giving ourselves that grace, that kindness and compassion. But as we're doing that, so maybe we're thinking we're like a rubber band. I feel like I have to illustrate it. We're like pulling back a little bit, right? Maybe pulling back and doing that regrouping, which is interesting because that's what I think Mercury retrogrades are said to be here for us to do. So as this could be said is a time for us to be doing that if we're following the energy of the astrology, that we're pulling back and revisiting, reviewing, reflecting, right? And so doing that personal work, which can involve the self-care, the spirituality, the support of others, which is really important too. My friend Barbie, I was gonna say Stacy would say too though, because Stacy has a lot of amazing group things, and I'm sure that's why she knows, and being a coach as well, that support is really important. So, or that I know I get to help people as their support with attending to their trauma, right? So, but as we attend to it and we're doing that pulling back maybe, then like pow, right? We shoot off with so much more momentum now that we're like lighter and freer and more connected, more aware of even just what we've been through, right? And more in a connected place with ourselves, more empowered, and the energy of what we've freed up and let go of, and now the energy now that we have so much more room to allow in the energy of, again, those new ideas, the inspiration, the excitement, or the remembering of what in life we love, right? And even more of who we are, right? Maybe a whole new version of ourselves, more available as we lift the weights of that trauma and how it weighs on us, right? But again, the biggest first pieces seem to be, like I keep talking to myself about, that kindness, that compassion we can have with ourselves. First of all, just to acknowledge that we've been through things, we're currently going through things, but then also just loving and knowing that the more we get consistent with things like our self-care, really diving into our spiritual practices to help build the feelings of spiritual connection and the right support, right? That so much is changeable and really can be that rubber band moment, right? As we take the time and the awareness to care for ourselves, that we can now like really shoot forward out of that trauma and into a whole new level of ourselves, right? Which often does involve using what we've learned to help others, right? That's kind of like the ultimate shamanic shift. Or some could say, I think Deepak Chopra would say that that's like ultimately our purpose that we're all here to do, to come here and solve some things for ourselves and then find ways to share that with others. So amazing that our trauma could be part of that, right? But especially if we handle it with care and take it, realize it's for real. And then even now, as we're in these potentially traumatizing times, what can we be doing to not just store that trauma, right? To be in those older patterns of not being aware and letting it strain us, stress us, and drain us, right? Change us in relationships for sure, So yeah, I'm just hoping even just the awareness of this thing called trauma, much less new approaches, can help us all. So I hope that's helpful for you all, and thanks for listening. Love you guys so much. Namaste.